I pledge fairness, integrity.
Support for Down and Dirty comes from listeners like you and the Tampa Bay Times. The Pulitzer Prize winning newspaper is available around the Tampa Bay area and online at tampabay.com. Thanks to the Tampa Bay Times for their support.
Good morning. This is John Dingfelder, and you're listening to Down and Dirty on WMNF.org. We are so glad to have you here on this beautiful Friday morning. And we have some less than beautiful topics to discuss with three beautiful people, though. And the topics were... excuse me. Looks like I've got some technical issues. Anyway, the topics we're going to discuss have to do with mainly with First Amendment issues, threats to the judiciary, threats to our universities, our law firms, chilling effects going on all across the country. And we've got some very wise folks who are here and who are involved in these issues, and we'll go ahead and get started. We do have Skip on the board. Good morning, Skip.
Hey, good morning, John.
We got Irene answering the calls in the other room. Good morning, Irene. And that phone number, if you don't have it memorized, is 813-239-9663. And we welcome your calls probably in about 10 or 15 minutes. But to introduce our guest, let me start with somewhat of a regular with us and with other shows at WMNF. James Shaw is a civil liberties attorney located here in Tampa, probably been at practicing law 20 plus years, and he's getting a little gray in the beard. Good morning, James Shaw.
Good morning, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming down. How's life?
Living the dream, brother.
How old are those children now?
The oldest one is 17.
Oh, my God.
And Dean just turned 10.
Oh, my God. They're getting big. I remember when the little one was born.
Yeah.
And we've got Debbie Sines Crockett. Debbie Crockett grew up in Maryland. She came to Florida for the beautiful weather and other opportunities back in 2004. And she does practice law as well. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning.
We just met yesterday. Debbie organized a fantastic event, sort of a protest, with a bunch of lawyers. I think we had about 70 lawyers out on the street in front of the federal courthouse. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. How are you, Deb?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
Good. Welcome to WMNF.
I'm excited to be here for the first time.
This is the station and voice of liberty here. And
I'm in the right place then.
There you go. As I was telling my sister as I was driving over, I said, well, if the FBI comes and snatches me off the station, just call my wife and, bail me out. And we have Joe Ragoukas. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
Yeah, come up to that microphone or pull it towards you.
All right.
Yeah. How you doing, Joe?
I'm great, John. Thank you.
And Joe is a regular guy. What do you do for a living, Joe? I don't even know.
Stay-at-home dad.
Perfect. That's the best job in
Probably
the world.
Too much time on my hands to come up with these kind of ideas.
How old are you? The little one?
My oldest will be 3 next month. No, wait. I'm sorry. 3 in 5 days.
And then a baby also? Or?
Yes, sir. I got a 17-month-old.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I had the good fortune of staying home with my son for 3 months when he was born, for the first 3 months, and it was wonderful. And I think we bonded, and we're still bonded. So that's fantastic. Joe, the reason Joe is here is Joe decided to go ahead and organize a First Amendment forum that's going to happen tomorrow night on Saturday evening.
Yes, sir.
At the shuffleboard place called Shuffle on North Florida Avenue, just north of downtown. And we're going to talk about that too. So, but let's talk about what the heck is going on in our world, in our nation. You know what? Debbie organized this event, Skip, yesterday, and Chris from the station here was down there and got some sound bites. So let's hear what the folks at Debbie's event had to say. This is about a minute of sound bites.
I pledge fairness, integrity, and civility. I pledge fairness, integrity, and civility. Not only in court, but also in all.
A crowd of over 30 people stood outside the federal courthouse in downtown Tampa with their right arms raised, reciting the oath of admission to the Florida bar. The oath was led by retired Hillsborough County Circuit Court Judge Samantha Ward. Ward says it's important to remember what they pledged to do.
I think that when judges are attacked for legal decisions that were made, like some of the speakers were saying, and they're not attacked as it relates to the quality of the decision they make, but just the acts of the decision themselves, then we're not giving deference to what the rulings are.
The event comes as President Donald Trump has repeatedly gone after the judicial system. In March, Trump called for the impeachment of a U.S. District Court judge after he temporarily blocked a flight for deported migrants to an El Salvador prison. Trump also called him a, quote, troublemaker and agitator on social media. Tyrone Laurie says he came out to the Tampa rally to support the rule of law. He hasn't recited the oath since he became an attorney in 2023, but says it feels great to reaffirm it given everything going on in the nation today.
Hearing the words, just it makes me proud to just be in the particular profession that we're in, and also just serving the clients, and it just made me feel good inside.
An advance no fact prejudicial to the honor or
Chris Young,
reputation.
WMNF News, Tampa.
Well, thanks, Chris, for putting that together. Deb, give us a little background on what was your motivating factor on putting this together. And I did forget, the piece started out with, I'd say, at least 60, 70 attorneys. We were out there with our right hands raised and reaffirming the oath that we all pledged, when we became lawyers.
That's right. So yesterday, May 1st, is Law Day, and it has been Law Day, I believe, since 1958. I think it was declared first by President Eisenhower and Congress after that. So May 1st has always been Law Day. But this year, in 2025, it was kind of recoined as Law Action Day. And so all across the country, all on the same day, on Law Day, at noon, lawyers and judges, law students, legal professionals were gathered in front of their courthouses, mostly federal courthouses, but in their respective jurisdictions and cities, many to reaffirm and take their oath again, and also to stand up for democracy, the rule of law, judicial independence, and independence in our profession. And so that was the impetus. I had seen on social media that this was being organized, of course, in D.C. They were going to be out in front of the U.S. Supreme Court and other cities across the jurisdiction. And I didn't see Tampa on the map. And I was a little perturbed. And I wondered, well, how do we get this done in Tampa? And I mentioned it to one of my law partners, who immediately, his name's David, who immediately said, well, let's put it on the calendar. Let's go. And I said, wait a minute, we're not on the map. Nobody's doing Tampa. And then he said to me, well, we should do it, which was code for, okay, Debbie, you should do it. Okay. So I looked into it.
Always the problem of volunteering, right?
Lawyers for Good Government and other organizations were the ones who were spearheading this. And there was a website where you could literally get on the map with them. And they gave me all of the tools that I needed to help get this organized. And with
how long ago was that? That you had this conversation with David?
3 weeks ago. So 3 weeks from finding out about it. It was on a Wednesday evening, and then Thursday I started in earnest. Then I put Tampa on the map and started the work to get organized. So
that's awesome.
Yep. So for 3 weeks worth of work and reaching out to folks, sending massive emails, social media, I was very, very pleased with the turnout. And yeah, I did take issue. I had my husband count and others count yesterday. At our peak, we had almost 70 people there.
Well,
so
Chris was real busy, so he just miscounted a little bit. But we'll cut him some slack.
Yeah, that's okay.
But James, this term, the rule of law, what does that mean to the average layperson might not even understand the importance of that. What does it mean to you?
It's one of those things that you don't think about until you have to think about it. I remember hearing the phrase back in law school that we are a nation of laws and not of men, and I never really understood what that meant, but it's becoming clear to me now, right? The phrase means that this is a country where we have rules, and we follow those rules, and no person is more important than those rules. In a nation of men, it would be whoever is the strongest, whoever has convinced the most number of people to do whatever he says, that's the person who calls the shots. And this is a country that's not run like that. I was thinking a lot about, for the Shakespeare buffs, Henry VI, the famous line where Dick the Butcher says to Jack Cade, the rebel leader, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. And that's often been used as a pejorative, but the meaning within the play is the first thing that we do if we want to break all the rules is get rid of the people whose job it is to make sure that we're following them. And
even back in Shakespeare's time, there was some recognition of the importance of lawyers.
Right, because lawyers are the one. I remember
barristers or solicitors or whatever they call them over in England.
I remember participating in the recount in 2018, and I remember being in a room full of volunteers, most of them lawyers, and you had Democrat lawyers and Republican lawyers, and we're looking at ballots, and we're calling shots onto what we think the intention of the voter is, and we've got judges there. And I remember thinking, 400 years ago, this dispute would have been resolved in the streets with arrows and swords, and here we are in this air-conditioned room with a bunch of attorneys, and that's the difference between a country that's ruled by laws and a country that's ruled by men.
Or the decision might have been made in the king's chambers,
right,
with a closed door, which sounds a little more similar now. In my world, in my context, I would look to in the 70s when I was in high school, Richard Nixon. He had a lot of issues going on, which we won't get distracted with, but the bottom line is the rule of law became a big issue at that point because, was this man above the law? And ironically, at that point in time, Congress stepped in, including the Republicans of Richard Nixon's party, stepped in and said, no, this will not abide. And basically, the word to Nixon was, you need to resign.
That's what I don't want to say that's what we've lost, because I don't think we've lost it yet, but that's what we're losing if we don't fight for it. Even Richard Nixon, when the Supreme Court ordered him to turn over the tapes, he turned them over. Now, if he refused, I don't know what they were going to do about it. Right. They have a staff of maybe 20 security guards who would be no match for the United States military. So I suppose they could have gone over and demanded them and fought with whoever was, the Secret Service. But they had no way to enforce it except for Richard Nixon believed, as much as I don't want to turn over these tapes, I do want to be somebody who follows the rules.
And Nixon was an attorney,
right?
So perhaps that had some influence on his decision making.
I think, but now we're to a place where it's, well, wait a minute. If I don't follow the rule, who's going to do anything about it? That has become the replacement for we should follow the rules. We're a nation of laws.
Yeah, Joe, what's inspired you to come over from all that good time you're having with the children and get involved as I'll be a little corny here. Joe Citizen is you're stepping up.
Thank you. To your point, you don't realize how much you appreciate the legal structure until you see it being completely destroyed. And I see these attacks on every institution, every.
Give me an example. Which one is particularly offensive to you?
Well, I started this project. Mine was a couple months now. I started back in March. And I think I can't even recall what I was so upset about. I want to say it was Canada, that we were going after Canada, or that we weren't supporting Ukraine, another democracy. But now, and there was attacks on all the institutions that Doge was going through. They went after NOAA. Which when I called our senator, I was like, we live in Florida and you're cutting our weather services. The post office, both my grandfathers worked in the post office, were being threatened. And then the immigration, the deportations that were happening without due process and people just being scooped off the street. All these things just kind of built and built and built. And I just kind of was like, I got to do something. What am I going to sit on the sidelines and just watch this authoritarian grab happen and not do anything? I'm not a violent person. I like music, and I have a lot of creative friends. So I was like, let me see what I can come up with. And that's kind of how this came about.
Excellent. Debbie Crockett has joined us here, and she's an attorney, and she's very interested and very involved in this. Yesterday, there was a lot of discussion about the attacks on the judiciary. And obviously, you know, all three of us are in court regularly, and we understand the importance of the judiciary and of an independent judiciary. So, you know, what's happening, you know, from at the federal level?
So this is a great segue to what we were just talking about, the rule of law, and Joe Public, right, coming in and saying, you know what, this is not acceptable. Yesterday at the event, I had someone come up to me, and she said, "Thank you so much for putting this together." And she said, "I want you to know I'm not a lawyer, but we are watching the lawyers, because if the lawyers don't stand up for the rule of law, you are almost like the gatekeepers. If you can't do it, because we're looking to you lawyers to help us understand what's going on and to defend the rule of law and democracy, because you guys are the lawyers." And I even said to her, wow, I feel a lot of weight on my shoulders and more pressure than I did, not in a bad way, but almost like a charge, a call to action. And I hadn't heard that perspective before from someone who is not in the legal profession, to say, we're looking to you lawyers to stand up, to do something, to say this isn't right. So I took that as a personal charge, and I take also, Joe, what you're putting together tomorrow, I feel the same way about it. And the reason why we need an independent judiciary, let's just look at how our system works. If the judges cannot, and I said this yesterday, if lawyers don't stand up for our judges, because they can't come out and speak publicly, who will? If lawyers don't come up and stand up for democracy and the rule of law, who will? It is left to us. We had two retired judges there yesterday, but I emphasize the term retired, because when they retire, they can come out, including Sam Ward, who was one of your speakers, they can come out and say what they want. But all those other judges over in the courthouse, I'm going to guess 95% of them feel exactly the same way, but by their judicial canons, their judicial ethics, they're not allowed to come on the street and give those sort of quasi-political comments. Correct. And that's unfortunate. So we, as their brothers and sisters, as attorneys, need to stand up for them, to speak for them, because they can't. And the reason that is important that they have judicial independence is because, again, this is how our system works. If a judge makes a ruling, whether he or she is right or wrong on the law, the way you challenge that is through the appellate process, through an appeal. And I know everybody, even non-lawyers, understand that when a judge makes a decision, there's an appeal process, and it goes up the chain. And until a higher court tells a lower court, you're wrong, lower court, the judicial orders and rulings must be obeyed, period. Now, we ask the question, what happens even in Nixon's era? What happens if you don't listen to what the judges say? You don't listen to their orders, particularly if the administration, the government doesn't do that. Where are we? That's the true constitutional crisis. That's when we are at a crossroads. We have three different branches of government that are, I know co-equal is not really a word, but they're equal. And one of the things that the administration's job, the president's job, is to make sure that the laws are administered once the laws are made by Congress. And it is the judiciary's job to interpret and say what those laws mean and how they apply to everyone. And so when that system breaks down because one branch won't listen to the other, that is the constitutional crisis. That is when maybe there would be a military uprising. Maybe there would be, Congress and normal citizens also saying that's not acceptable. That's what we're trying to avoid. We as lawyers need to stand up, and citizens, to avoid that. James, didn't we have an instance where the president and his folks deported some folks that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court recently, and they said, you need to revisit this? And the administration sort of ignored it, right? The Supreme Court ordered him to facilitate the return. That was the language. So this is the gentleman that the administration says that he's a member of MS-13. Oh, yeah, the knuckles. And used as evidence a photoshopped picture of some knuckles that are close up, and in the photographs of the president saw the knuckles. Right. He knew what it said. In the photographs of him in El Salvador, there are no such tattoos on his fingers. It's clearly not. It's either not his
real fingers, or it's
just silly.
It's silly, but we've also kind of lost this concept of epistemology. How do you know if anything is true? That if I say X and you say Y, well, we're both right, and I have every right to believe that there are tattoos on this man's knuckles, even though there are not. But putting that aside, they ordered the president to facilitate his return, and then they said, well, we're interpreting that as meaning to not do anything to stop it, but we're not actually going to.
And they still haven't.
They still haven't. So you're reaching this place where even Richard Nixon wouldn't go. Of, well, what are you going to do about it if I don't follow your rule?
I wonder if there's any discussion about any contempt. Typically if somebody doesn't listen to what the judge says, the judge will initiate some contempt action. It'd be nice if the U.S. Supreme Court would do that.
Well, they can do that, but are they going to send a member of the administration to jail? I mean, it becomes...
No, I think if they fined the president, $10 million a day, that would probably get his attention better than anything else.
And if he doesn't pay, then what? At some point or another, our country works because we voluntarily comply with the laws, and we self-restrain ourselves. And there are things we just don't do, even if it would accomplish our mission. Where this judicial thing started was there was a policy within Immigration and Customs Enforcement that there are places where you don't go to apprehend someone. So you don't go into a church, you don't go into a hospital, and you don't go into a court and intercept somebody at a court appearance. Recently, the administration has changed that and begun showing up in courtrooms to arrest people who
what
were
was that, Illinois? Somewhere in the Midwest. Wisconsin. Yeah, talk about that for a second for folks who didn't hear about that.
So there was an undocumented immigrant that had a domestic violence charge against him, and he was appearing for a hearing in front of Judge Hannah Dugan for that. And waiting out in the hallway, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement were there to grab him when he came out. She was annoyed by that, and this proceeding. This is not something that has ever happened before. The courtroom is a sacred place that you don't use as a place to enter. It's like a
gotcha place.
Yeah, it's not a place for that. It's a place to address the charge against him. And
it's not to say that ICE doesn't coordinate with local jails and maybe go and grab people at the jail or something like that. I've seen that happen for many, many years.
A jail, sure, but not a courtroom.
Exactly.
That was treated as sacred up until very recently. And so she allowed them to leave out of a side door that was for jurors into another part of the hallway. They did see him. An ICE agent got onto the elevator with him and rode the elevator down to the first floor with him and waited until he got outside and then apprehended him. And then they arrested the judge and said for letting him go out the side door.
A couple of weeks later,
right
after, I'm sure, lots of discussion in Washington, all the way up to Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. I think she was either involved or she sanctioned it at some point, right?
And she made a statement saying, this is a warning to the other judges. But it was, you see this pattern a lot with this administration is that they will test something on somebody. And they'll pick somebody. This looked like a judge who was very likely to cry during her mug shot. I think that probably was part of their calculus. And let's make an example out of this person.
Who wouldn't? I would.
And then all the other judges will be frightened not to fall into line. That's the calculus. And so it's the. I've talked about this term with you before, chilling effect. But chilling effect is a legal term where when it's unclear what the rules are, but it is clear that breaking the rules is going to bring some catastrophic penalty down upon you, people tend to not take any risks. People tend to fall into line, and that's at some point not a good thing.
I want to talk about the chilling effect also as related to our universities and some of our other institutions that Joe is referring to. Let's take a call. We've got Simon in Lakeland. Simon is a regular listener and a regular caller and always has interesting things to say. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. It's an honor to be able to speak to such esteemed attorneys. The question I have, a couple questions actually, I'll try to keep it brief, is that the issue of judge shopping or the issue of the Supreme Court, whether they be liberal or conservative when one is interpreting the law. The college campuses are one I view is not an issue per se of free speech, an issue of infringement of civil rights of the Jewish students on campus. Now, very quickly, the ACLU represented the Nazi Party in 1977 in Skokie. I doubt it highly that any of the attorneys in the studio or the ACLU would represent a chapter of the Nazi Party on college campus as a free speech issue, and that professors in college campuses would start to teach the inferiority of the Negro. So free speech is an oxymoron.
All right, Simon, you've given us a lot to chew on, and I appreciate your call. All right. James, excuse me, it's my mic. There we go. Let's talk briefly about the ACLU. You have been an ACLU attorney for many, many years, volunteer. You've litigated on behalf of the ACLU of Florida on a variety of issues. You and I are both very familiar with the representation by the ACLU of Nazis in Illinois. I happen to be Jewish. Always felt a little weird on that, but the civil liberties and First Amendment side of me prevailed, and I think it's fine. I think everybody deserves an attorney, including Nazis in Skokie, Illinois. James?
Yeah, that was controversial at the time. It's still controversial now within the ACLU. At that time in 1978, about 1/3 of the membership of the ACLU resigned as a result of that case. But to go back to Thomas Jefferson, his view of free speech was, if somebody's saying something that's wrong, then correct it. If their logic is unsound, then refute it. But for God's sake, let's hear the man speak, right? And so it was controversial at the time because the Nazi Party wanted to have a parade in Skokie, Illinois, where there were Holocaust survivors living. I mean, it was very
targeted. Yeah,
there was nothing pleasant about it, but they did have the rally, and the city of Skokie did not fall to the Nazi Party because the substance of their message was deeply, deeply flawed and rejected.
And our nation survived very well.
And had the city not tried to silence them, we would not be talking about that right now. When you try to silence a voice with government power, you end up amplifying it 100% of the time. I guess the kids call that the Streisand effect now, where when you try to silence somebody, it ends up turning up the volume on their voice because people discuss that. Now that what Simon said is controversial even to this day. So the ACLU of Virginia did help Richard Spencer speak at the Unite the Right rally, where somebody ultimately was run over by a car, and so there was a lot of
the Charlottesville.
Right, there was a lot of. I'm sorry, I said Virginia, I meant North Carolina. But there was a lot of.
No, you were right, Virginia.
Oh, Virginia. There was a lot of soul searching that I wonder if there's blood on our hands that we helped someone to speak, but at some point you have to default to every one of us has somebody else that we wish would just shut up. And sometimes we wish the government would use its power to shut that person up. It's a normal thought. If you trust Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis with the authority to decide who is out of line and shut them up, then great. But I don't trust anybody with that power, because anybody who has that power is going to abuse it. So it has to be an absolute. You have to say, people are allowed to, you can't silence them before they speak, and you can't punish the speech that was given, because as soon as we start to negotiate with that, then you end up giving somebody power that anyone who has it would abuse it.
And Debbie, as we learned in law school and subsequently the all the way up to the Supreme Court has been very supportive of sort of this absolute issue on First Amendment and speech, except of course, fire in a theater and that sort of thing, but in regard to content neutral, and people should have a right to speak. Is the attack on the universities and on the campuses and on the Palestinian students, who have chosen to speak, and some of them are now getting deported because they had green cards, but now they spoke up, and to me it all seemed like pretext. this notion that, it's, bothering the Jewish students, or it's an attack on Jews and that sort of thing. That seemed pretextual to me. I don't know.
Certainly. I think that there have been, and I've read in the news, of course, that there are Jewish students and other organizations who are standing up and say, please don't use our religion, right, as a reason for this bad behavior of targeting these other students who have the right to free speech. The same argument, I think, that we're talking about with free speech, regardless of whether you are a citizen, if you are in this nation, right, you have the right to free speech. The same goes with due process. So we're talking about snatching people up who have green cards, who are here on student visas, and the government saying, oh, why do we owe them due process? It's the same idea. Just like every person, not citizen, every person in this country has the right under our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, to free speech, free religion, to freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, all of those things that we hold dear as Americans. That does not just apply to citizens. Our Constitution, on its face, if you read the words, it says every person. It doesn't say every citizen. So the same applies for due process. Any person who is in this country has the right to due process. I've heard the argument yesterday for the first time. Well, when immigrants have crossed our borders, either legally or illegally, they didn't get due process then. They didn't need due process then. Why do we need them to why do we need to give them due process to remove them? That's because the law of this land, the supreme law of this land, which is the Constitution of the United States of America, says so, period. And we must follow the Constitution. The framers, way smarter than all of us today. They knew exactly what they were writing, and we need to follow the Constitution. Whether you believe we need to follow it verbatim as it's written or as it has been interpreted, the language of the Constitution, it's in English. It's clear.
Joe, this issue about universities, a lot of what we read in the New York Times or whatever, speaks to Harvard and Columbia and that sort of thing. But here at the University of South Florida, students are protesting because apparently the administration is now coordinating with Homeland Security, allowing them to come on campus and do who knows what. But are you keeping up on that?
Not at USF, no.
No.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. I read it somewhere.
I
Debbie?
did as well. I did as well.
To that point, though, there's so much out there, and I apologize for not.
It's overwhelming.
There's just so much to keep up with.
My wife says that's part of the.
I'm surprised, and I'm shocked.
My wife says that's part of the strategy, is to overwhelm us with such a blank storm that we don't even know where to start. And who knows what's going on. Skip, you got an email to read to us?
Yeah, this is coming from Bubba. What does your guest think about Congress removing Trump through impeachment? Maybe we've reached a breaking point with Trump's tyranny in this term, and they actually remove him from office in his second term.
I think that would be amazing if you could get Congress to do that. Interestingly, I heard a speaker yesterday. I was listening to it, and that the president, the administration, has no right to impeach any member of Congress. Congress has the right to impeach the president, right? And think about the reason for that. Because again, our framers said, our founding fathers said, we will not be in a monarchy. We are not going to have a king. And so Congress arguably has more power than the administration because Congress can remove the president. The president cannot remove members of Congress.
Checks and balances. It's all about checks and balances. All right, we're going to take a couple of calls. The phones are ringing off the hook as I knew they would. John in Lutz. Good morning, John.
Good morning. I just wanted to comment that that we're living in such an outrageous dystopia where radical Zionists like Simon can say that they're threatened by peaceful protesters who are simply calling for peace and an end to genocide. That they feel threatened, and yet there's mobs of violent thug Zionists roaming around New York City, throwing bricks at the heads of anyone wearing a keffiyeh. And no tear gas was used on them, and yet tear gas was used on me and other peaceful protesters at USF. It's an outrageous dystopia we're living in.
John, we appreciate that. We appreciate your acts of peaceful activism. Keep it up, John.
And if I could add that there was a rabbi, and there's very many rabbis, Orthodox rabbis, who have said that a Zionist is the diametric opposite of a Jew, because the Jewish people, the Jewish faith, is very peaceful and non-aggressive. And Zionists have taken an aggressive, genocidal action that they are not going to stop. They're not going to stop until they've created this greater Israel where they take over parts of Egypt, Jordan.
Well, listen, we had a good discussion about that, but it's been about a year and a half about the Gaza and Zionism and all that. We will have another discussion another day. Thank you, John. We appreciate it. All right, let's jump to Mike in Sarasota.
Thank you for taking my call. I would like to, I appreciate the direction your conversation has taken, and I'd like to echo what the caller before just said. It is deeply ironic and offensive that Simon, a prominent local Zionist, and by the way, a man responsible for eliminating Rob Lori from your news coverage at the station, would describe our American right to free speech as an oxymoron. And this is sadly, this is reflective of what the Zionists and the pro-Israel people are trying to do. They're mounting a campaign against American free speech. For instance, they're making it illegal to do BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions in certain states. They're trying to change the definition of anti-Semitism to include normal criticism of Israel. And now you have people like Simon who are trying to...
Well, listen, Mike, I don't want this to get into a shouting match about Simon this and Mike this and that sort of thing.
Well, let me finish up just real quickly.
Go ahead.
Now they're trying to say that people can't demonstrate on college campuses.
Yes.
So, and it's, of course, it's the long-held total lie of the Israel crowd, which is to call any speech they don't like, and they call anti-Semitic. And it reminds me of Stalin, who said he was all for free speech, except for free speech he didn't like.
All right. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate you. Okay, let's jump in with Jack from Dover. Try and stay on topic. We're talking about First Amendment and some other very, very important constitutional issues.
Yes, sir, I will. I just want to state that in 1981, when I was in the Air Force working for the Assistant Surgeon General, Dr. Wilkerson, at the time, he was a dental surgeon. I was his chairside assistant. On base, we were, I guess it was a recommendation. It wasn't really a rule. It wasn't mandatory. But while I was sitting there and the doctor was not in my presence, it was a general rule for me to not talk about sex, religion, or, well, there was a third thing, politics. And I'm wondering if the campuses, the deans, the administrative body of these schools isn't really going more in that direction, saying that you do have the right under the Constitution of freedom of speech. We're just asking, because of 9/11 and because of the Boston Marathon, that you don't say anything that could be misinterpreted as supporting Hamas.
All right.
So if you have a comment on that, I would love to hear how you feel about what I just stated. Thank you.
Isn't when you're in college the time that you're trying to figure out life and the world and what's going on, and maybe you're becoming more, I don't want to say politically active, but you're becoming more secure and learned, right, during those times in college. And maybe things you learn in college are affecting how you're perceiving the world. That's the time. Think about. I'm over 50 now. So thinking about the time when I was in college and all the things I learned and what I have learned since then in life and how that shaped me. That's the time to be asking for students to be asking those questions, to be questioning and developing those ideas. So the idea that the administration that your caller was making, the administration should be telling or is telling students to, hey, let's not talk about religion, politics, and those types, sex, whatever. That's the time when you should be questioning and talking about those things and learning.
I think the universities I think it was difficult for the universities to try and balance free speech and discourse and that sort of thing, but at the same time keep their campuses safe and keep the buildings from being overrun, blah blah blah. So that was difficult, but I think the Trump administration has now jumped in and using blackmail. What did they threaten Harvard with, James? Like $1 billion of grant money that...
Right. Do as you're told, or we will withhold the money that you're using to research the cure for cancer. I mean, that's not hyperbole. That's literally what happened. To put in context...
And that's working, though, because most of the campuses have collapsed. The administrations have given in and agreed with the Trump administration because of the fear of taking that money. Harvard might be the exception because they're so well endowed.
Harvard's in a position to fight back, and it's fighting back. My heart is broken by how many of the country's venerated law firms lined up to kiss the ring of the new monarch and ask for a comfy place within the new order instead of fighting to maintain the old order. But I want to put into context the campus thing, because we are not talking about the student code of conduct. I mean, we're talking about the Department of Justice. So the New York Times reported yesterday that a DOJ official, Emil Bove, he ordered an investigation into a Columbia student group called Columbia University Apartheid Divest. That it's a loose coalition of students who were protesting what they view as the overreaching by the Israeli government. He asked them to obtain a membership list of the students who are in this group so that they can be, not that there's any suspicion that they've committed any crime.
The university asked, or the Trump administration?
The Department of Justice.
Wow.
Asked prosecutors in the Civil Rights Division to obtain a membership list for this group, and then we're going to investigate these people, see if we can find anything that they've done wrong. And I've always said, most listeners right now have already committed 3 felonies today. I mean, it's easy to, everyone eventually breaks a rule. There's so many rules. And so if you are in the crosshairs of the government, find this person, see if they've done anything wrong, and get them. That's new. That's something that hasn't happened before in the history of the country.
I think during the McCarthy era in the 50s, I think they were talking about trying to find out from libraries what kind of books people checked out, right?
Well, you're right. It isn't new. It's the Red Scare all over again, except instead of communism, now it's anti-Semitism, defined as anything Donald Trump doesn't like is anti-Semitism, right? But any criticism, I reject this notion that to support someone, I must sign off on their sins. You see, we saw that with the police. We have a representative who likes to make this argument that we're not supporting the police unless we let them get away with any kind of abuses that they want. That I love my children, but I don't show that love by letting them do anything that they want and not holding them accountable. I don't think that holding the Israeli government accountable is the same thing as anti-Semitism, but it fits nicely on a bumper sticker. Anti-Semitism must stop, and then define it however you like, and we must investigate these people. They asked the DOJ actually tried to get a search warrant to make Instagram turn over its records for who's controlling the Instagram account for this group. Now, to the lawyers' credit, the lawyers refused to do it. The prosecutors refused to do it. The magistrate refused to issue the search warrant. And when the district judge asked the magistrate to take a second look at it, he also held that they can't have the search warrant, and if they apply again, they have to attach the transcript of me rejecting this one to that application. So the lawyers pushed back, the apparatus pushed back, that without somebody who's following the orders, a dictator is Napoleon at Elba calling out orders to no one who's listening. So the people who listen are the people who need to push back.
And that's the point. The attorneys who are working under Pam Bondi right now, they need to be able to, instead of plausible deniability when they come in front of the court and say, Judge, I don't know, I don't have that information, which we know has happened, those attorneys need to stand up and say, you know what, this is my bar license. I went to law school. I paid for this. I earned this, not Pam Bondi, not President Trump, not anybody in this administration. It is my bar license. I need to do what I understood when I took the oath to be an attorney. I need to uphold that. And as a prosecutor, you also have, prosecutorial discretion, but also duties and responsibilities. So upholding that, those are the attorneys at the front line who need to say no and do exactly what you just described.
They need to revisit their oath the way that you had us revisit it yesterday. And I'm glad you did, because, it's been a long time since I bothered looking at my oath.
And since you read that oath, it has been changed by the Florida Supreme Court.
I thought so.
Yep, there's a line in there about civility, behaving with civility to not only the courts, but certainly to the courts, but to your opposing counsel, to everyone in the justice system, in the judicial system, to the opposing parties as well. And there are people, you can read ethics opinions here in this state where attorneys have been disbarred for uncivil behavior. And I'm not talking about fisticuffs in the courtroom. I'm talking about on social media, calling the attorney a jerk, calling the opposing counsel liars.
Behavior at depositions.
Well,
and that sort
no,
of
but
thing.
this is even just social media, not in person.
Wow.
There have been attorneys disbarred for that uncivil behavior. And yet we have Pam Bondi, who's a Florida lawyer, and others who are Florida lawyers who are disparaging our courts, which is against the oath that we took yesterday, we retook yesterday.
Yeah, and I did hear Ms. Bondi, who I personally know from many years ago when she was a prosecutor, but I did hear her say the other day something like, "What's wrong with our judiciary? They're not marching in lockstep to what we want." Well, they must have missed that part of the Constitution. Joe, we've only got a couple minutes left. I want you to talk about your event tomorrow night. Let's get some folks interested, and how do they find out about it?
Well, you can go to Shuffle's Facebook page to find out.
Shuffle, like shuffleboard.
Yep. Yes, sir. I started grassroots, thinking about this, and I just started reaching out to people. I've reached out. I wanted to do something that spoke on behalf of the First Amendment, because I feel, as you guys have been discussing, it's been under attack through all different ways. And by the way, I'm greatly honored to be sitting at this table with you two, because you're very, very knowledgeable, and I've learned a lot. And
where does that leave me, Joe?
Chop liver.
Chop liver. I'm just teasing. Yes, Joe, who else are you going to have? I know you're going to have James Shaw.
James Shaw. We'll have City Council person Lynn Hertog. We'll also have Luis Salazar. He's the president of the LGBTQ Democratic Caucus speaking. I have a historian, Manny Leto, will be presenting history on Tampa Press. I have a stand-up comedian, Amanda Hoffman, who is really isn't going to do anything in regard to the First Amendment other than tell jokes, which is freedom of speech.
So maybe we need the lighter side of all of this.
And then we have some live music. We have Henry Locke will be performing. He's a student at Blake High School. John Nowicki and Mark Ignatius.
Is there an admission fee for?
There is a $10.
Okay, we're not allowed to talk about it. But Skip, thank you.
Donation.
Donation. Yes. But anyway, folks can find out all of this at the Shuffle Facebook site.
Yes.
And what time does it start?
Starts at 5 to 10.
And this is over there off Florida Avenue, just north of downtown. I think the intersection is Columbus.
Yeah.
And
it's a beautiful facility. There are wonderful people that run that place, and they've been so. Actually, everybody that's participating in this event are volunteering. So it's just really. I was feeling a little alone, and I wanted to reach out and find some community. And this is what this is about tomorrow: is trying to bring that community together, show people that you shouldn't be afraid, that we can fight back. You know, I'm just a normal person. I just want to get out there and try to bring the community together and stand up against.
And it's not a partisan event by any means.
The Constitution is not partisan, right? It doesn't matter whether you're right or left. It's the Constitution.
Yeah, and I think we need to wake up 50% of the population and remind them of that. Hopefully we're doing that today. I'm going to take another call or two. I'm going to give everybody a heads up. If you go down where the other folks were going and personal attacks on various people, et cetera, we're going to hang up on you. So we got Joe in Venice. I'm limiting your First Amendment. Joe, are you there?
Yes, first I'd like to say congratulations to our new Pope Donald.
Pope Donald? Okay.
Yeah, he wants to be Pope, so there you go. He can be Pope.
Somebody said he liked that truck, that little Pope-mobile, you know?
The Pope-mobile, and he gets, there's a lot of, but the good thing is, he's gone, he's in the Vatican, and he only has one speech a year. That was on a joke last night. Anyway, the people of America, the registered voters, voted in Donald Trump. He wanted, before the election, he said, if I only had generals like Hitler had. Okay, there you go. All right, he likes Hitler. So I'll just, and now after his 100 days, he said, you haven't seen anything yet. So I believe, let's not sugarcoat this. I believe he wants to run our country into the hole, our economy, because he's more powerful when we're poor, and the rich people are more powerful when we're poor, and we don't have time to fight them when we're poor. I'll try to say this as fast as I can, get all these points, and
all right, you got one more because we're running out of time.
Okay, anyway, we elected him, and he's bad, and we got to get rid of him somehow. I don't know how, but he wants to run us. He wants martial law and take over the country. I believe that's what he wants to do. Okay, thank you.
It's a scary proposition. The New York Times had a summary in the Sunday, April 27th edition of they're calling it The Week in Trump. And it's a whole page of what happened April 18th through the 24th. And I'm just going to skim through it real quick because it's just mind-boggling. Let's see. Took steps to make tens of thousands of federal workers easier to fire. Joe, that goes to what you were talking about earlier. He replaced the acting commissioner of the IRS. I think we've had 4 commissioners of the IRS in the last month or two. He was blaming... Let's see. He asked the Supreme Court to reject the ACLU's emergency request to pause the deportation of Venezuelans. James, you have a long history with the ACLU. I read online that they now have 57 pending lawsuits all across the country against the administration.
Yeah, and the concern is that they're going to win those lawsuits and the administration is going to ignore the result because so far they've been doing well. So just yesterday, what the Trump administration tried to use was the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which allows the president to deport somebody who's operating on behalf of a foreign military and trying to wage war against the United States.
During times of war.
During times of war, right. And so President Trump declared that some Venezuelan street gang is actually, in cahoots with the Venezuelan president, and that this is an invasion, and he's going to invoke this archaic law.
The courts have been rejecting this.
The courts have been rejecting it, but as we've seen with the Supreme Court, I'm not so sure that they're going to obey an order to not deport someone, to return someone. So that's where the constitutional crisis part comes in.
The president railed against federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, while complaining on social media about the due process afforded to migrants in deportation proceedings. Debbie, how about that? God forbid, due process?
Right. That's back to my point. Due process is afforded to every person in this country. And so they have the right to dispute the charges, whether they're a member of the gang, whether they have a violent history. They get to air their grievances, if you will, in front of a judge and have that judge make a determination whether they should be able to stay or not. And that is not what's happening.
I recently heard an old Soviet Union joke, and the Soviets told great jokes about government overreach, and one of them was that someone saw all the foxes running for the border and stopped one and said, "What are you doing?" And the fox said, "Well, they're arresting all of the camels." And he says, "But you're not a camel, you're a fox." And he says, "Try explaining to the Interior Ministry that you're not a camel." Because the point being that it fits great on a bumper sticker to say, well, illegal immigrants don't deserve due process. Well, due process is how you determine that they are, in fact, an illegal immigrant. Otherwise, a U.S. citizen could be grabbed and deported.
Yep. Well, you've been listening to Down and Dirty on WMNF in Tampa. And we appreciate you listening. More importantly, we appreciate you getting involved. Consider going over there to Shuffle tomorrow night at 5 o'clock in Tampa and having more discussion about the First Amendment. The chilling effect, James, the president ordered an inquiry into Act Blue, the main Democratic fundraising platform. Oh, my God. So if you argue and if you want to raise money on the other side of these issues, the administration's coming after you. This is John Dingfelder, Down and Dirty. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Joe, Debbie, and